The moment you stop proving yourself is the moment you start being yourself. Proving comes from fear, being comes from freedom. What if your worth was never up for debate? From the very beginning of our lives, we are conditioned to believe that our worth is measured by how much we can prove to others. As children, we are praised when we do well in school, when we win the race, when we bring home the certificate. Slowly, the mind begins to associate approval with identity. We start to feel that who we are is not enough unless it is constantly validated by someone outside of us. This conditioning grows with us. It follows us into our teenage years, into our relationships, and into our careers. The subtle but powerful belief forms, I must prove myself to be accepted. I must achieve something to be worthy. I must show others who I am, otherwise they won't see me. The trap here is not in achievement itself. There is nothing wrong with striving, building, or succeeding. The trap is in tying your value to whether or not someone else recognizes it. That is where energy becomes enslaved to the outside world. Think about it. Every time you try to prove yourself to another person, whether it's a boss, a partner, a friend, or even a stranger on social media, you are saying, your opinion of me is more important than my opinion of me. In that moment, you hand over your power. You surrender your freedom. You allow your inner state to be dictated by external forces that may never be satisfied, no matter how much you do. This creates an endless cycle. You accomplish something, and for a brief moment you feel validated. You feel seen. You feel like you matter, but soon that feeling fades. The applause stops, the likes stop coming in, the praise dies down, and you are left with the same emptiness that drove you to prove yourself in the first place. Now the cycle starts again. You chase the next achievement, the next recognition, the next approval. It becomes like a drug. And just like any drug, it only provides temporary relief before demanding a higher dose the next time. But here is the truth most people miss. You were never born to prove yourself. You were born to express yourself. There is a fundamental difference. Proving comes from fear. Expressing comes from love. Proving is about showing the world you are enough. Expressing is about knowing you are enough and letting that truth flow naturally through everything you do. Proving is rooted in lack, in the belief that something is missing in you. Expression is rooted in wholeness, in the awareness that nothing has ever been missing. The more you live in the trap of validation, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. Because every time you change your behavior just to gain approval, you betray a small part of yourself. Over years, those small betrayals add up. You wake up one day and realize you are living a life that is not truly yours. Your career, your relationships, your choices, they were shaped more by what you thought others expected of you than by what your soul truly desired. That is the cost of living to prove yourself, and yet many people stay trapped here because they don't know another way. They are afraid that if they stop proving themselves, they will lose respect, they will lose love, they will lose recognition. But ironically, the opposite is true. When you stop needing to prove yourself, you free yourself to be authentic. You begin to act from a place of alignment rather than fear. You no longer chase attention, you attract it. People begin to feel something different about you. A quiet confidence, an unshakable presence, a calm strength, and that cannot be faked. This is why the most powerful people are not always the loudest. They don't walk into a room trying to dominate it, trying to impress everyone, trying to show off their achievements. Instead, they embody a state of being that speaks louder than words. They know that who they are does not depend on who sees it. Their worth is not on trial. They are not auditioning for approval. They are simply being, and in that being they radiate a kind of magnetism that no amount of proving can create. The trap of validation is also a trap of time and energy. When you spend your life proving yourself, you direct your energy outward. constantly trying to manage perceptions, constantly trying to keep up appearances, constantly seeking the next approval. But when you let go of that need, you reclaim that energy. You redirect it inward, where it can be used for transformation, for creativity, for healing, for growth. Energy that was once spent on proving can now be invested in becoming. That shift changes everything. The truth is, you cannot control how people perceive you. No matter how much you try to prove yourself, some will misunderstand you, some will criticize you, some will judge you. If your sense of self depends on their approval, you will always be at the mercy of forces you cannot control. But if your sense of self comes from within, from knowing who you are beyond titles, beyond achievements, beyond opinions, then you become untouchable. Their judgment cannot take away your peace. Their criticism cannot shake your foundation. Their disapproval cannot strip away your worth. Sometimes the greatest strength you can show is not in proving yourself, but in refusing to. It is in standing so firmly rooted in who you are that you no longer need to convince anyone. That is freedom, that is power, and that is where the journey of transformation truly begins. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a profound truth that shapes the entire experience of your life. Your body, your mind, your emotions, and even your reality are constantly being directed by what you choose to focus on. Attention is like a currency, and every thought, every feeling, every fixation is an investment of that currency. The question is, are you investing it in things that drain you or in things that expand you? When you feel the need to prove yourself to others, notice where your attention is. It is not inward, not centered, not focused on your own growth or vision. Instead, it is scattered outward, chasing after the judgments, opinions, and reactions of people who may not even understand you. In those moments, your energy is leaking into the external world. You are fueling the stories of others rather than writing your own. And the more attention you give away, the less energy you have left for creating the life you actually desire. Think about the countless times your mind replayed a conversation because you wanted someone to think better of you. Think about the energy wasted worrying about how you appear, whether you measure up, whether others approve. Each of those moments is an act of misdirected attention. They do not bring you closer to your highest potential. Instead, they anchor you deeper into the limitations of the old self. The more you feed that cycle, the more powerless you begin to feel. But the reverse is also true. When you withdraw your attention from proving yourself, when you stop obsessing about how you are perceived, you free up immense energy. That energy is not lost. It becomes available to you. Suddenly, the same energy that was once consumed by anxiety and self-doubt can be channeled into creativity, into learning, into healing, into transformation. This is the secret most people never realize. The energy you need to create a new reality is already within you, but it is trapped in the constant effort to maintain an identity in the eyes of others. Science shows us that attention has the power to literally rewire the brain. Neurons that fire together wire together. If your attention is constantly focused on proving yourself, your brain strengthens the neural circuits of inadequacy, comparison, and fear. But when your attention shifts inward, toward gratitude, self-worth, vision, and possibility, you build entirely new circuits. You recondition the mind and body to live from a different state of being. Over time, this becomes your new baseline. You no longer seek proof from the outside world because your internal wiring already reflects wholeness. Energy follows attention in another way as well. It creates coherence between your inner world and your outer world. If your attention is locked on lack, on proving, on never being enough, the energy you radiate is incoherent, fragmented, and chaotic. That signal goes out into the field of life, and the external world mirrors it back to you in the form of challenges, rejection, or dissatisfaction. But when your attention is placed on wholeness, on being, on living as if you are already enough, your energy becomes coherent, harmonious, and powerful. That is the energy that magnetizes opportunities, people, and circumstances that align with your higher self. It is not about denying the outside world. It is about choosing how much of your attention it deserves. If you let every opinion, every judgment, every glance dictate where your mind goes, you scatter your energy like confetti in the wind. But if you become intentional, if you learn to hold your attention on what you want to grow, then you concentrate your energy into creation rather than reaction. Attention becomes the steering wheel of your destiny. This is why practices of stillness, meditation, or even simple awareness are so powerful. They teach you to take back the reins of your attention. Instead of being dragged into every external distraction, you begin to choose. You begin to notice the endless thoughts about proving yourself and simply redirect them over and over until the habit dissolves. Each redirection is a reclaiming of energy. Each moment of focus on your own vision is a deposit into the bank of your future. Imagine your attention as sunlight. Scattered sunlight warms the skin, but concentrated sunlight, through a magnifying glass, can ignite a fire. In the same way, scattered attention feeds survival, but focused attention creates transformation. The moment you stop scattering your energy on external validation, you have the capacity to ignite a fire within yourself, a fire that lights the path to your highest potential. Energy is life. Where it flows determines the quality of your existence. If you continually pour it into the effort of proving yourself, you will always feel drained, restless, and incomplete. But when you direct it inward, when you cultivate the discipline to hold your attention on being rather than proving, you experience a new kind of vitality. You no longer feel like life is slipping away in the endless chase for approval. Instead, you feel centered, alive, connected to something greater than the opinions of others. The truth is, no one can take your energy without your permission. You give it away every time you make someone else's opinion more important than your own inner knowing. But the moment you recognize that your attention is the gateway, everything changes. You begin to choose carefully where you place it. You begin to protect it, nurture it, and direct it toward the things that matter. And as your attention shifts, so does your energy. And as your energy shifts, so does your life. There is a profound difference between being and proving, and it is a difference that shapes the quality of our lives in ways we rarely stop to consider. Proving is about effort, struggle, and seeking validation. Being is about alignment, authenticity, and expression. Proving is rooted in the need to be seen, to be recognized, to be accepted. Being is rooted in the inner knowing that you already are enough, regardless of who sees it or who doesn't. And yet, most people spend the greater part of their lives caught in the exhausting cycle of proving themselves, never realizing that what they are searching for cannot be found in the act of proving, but only in the state of being. When you try to prove yourself, you live in a constant state of reaction. Someone doubts you, so you push harder. Someone underestimates you, so you overextend yourself. Someone criticizes you, and suddenly your worth feels under attack. This cycle keeps you trapped in an external reference point, where your identity is dictated not by who you are, but by how others respond to you. In this state, life feels like a courtroom where you are always on trial, endlessly presenting evidence to justify your existence, and no matter how much proof you offer, the verdict of others is never final. Being, however, is completely different. Being is when you stop trying to convince the world and start living in alignment with your truth. It does not require force, explanation, or justification. It simply radiates. Think of a tree. A tree does not prove its worth. It does not apologize for taking up space or try to convince you of its value. It simply grows, stands tall, and expresses its essence. And in doing so, it becomes undeniable. That is the essence of being, effortless, natural, whole. The power of being is that it communicates far more than proving ever can. Proving is loud and desperate. It seeks attention. Being is quiet but magnetic. It draws attention without needing to. Proving depends on outcomes, achievements, or titles. Being transcends all of that. It is about the presence you carry, the energy you embody, the coherence between who you are inside and how you live outside. This is why people who are deeply rooted in being often seem so unshakable. They do not have to defend themselves. They do not have to argue for their worth. Their very existence is the statement. When you live from proving, you are never at rest. Even in success, you feel restless because you know that as soon as the applause fades, you will have to chase the next stage, the next performance, the next achievement. But when you live from being, there is peace. Achievements may come, recognition may come, but they are no longer the source of your identity. You do not need them to know your value. Instead, they become expressions of your inner wholeness rather than desperate attempts to fill a void. The shift from proving to being requires a deep reprogramming of the self. Proving is often born from wounds. The childhood moments when you felt unseen, the experiences when love felt conditional, the environments where approval had to be earned. These imprints create an inner narrative that whispers, "You are not enough until you prove it." Without awareness, that narrative runs your life. But being begins when you stop listening to that voice. Being begins when you recognize that no amount of proving will ever heal that wound, because the wound is not about the world outside. It is about the relationship within. When you decide to live from being, you break the pattern. You begin to choose authenticity over performance. You stop explaining yourself to people who are determined not to understand you. You stop chasing recognition from those who cannot give it. You stop measuring your worth by external scales that were never designed to capture your essence. Instead, you begin to embody the truth that worthiness is not something you earn. It is something you realize. It is already there, waiting beneath the noise of proving. Living in being is also what allows your future self to emerge. As long as you are proving, you are tied to the past. You are trying to prove that you are not who they said you were, not what they thought of you, not the mistakes you once made. In proving, you are always looking backward. But in being, you are fully present, and that presence becomes the soil where your future can grow. You step into the version of yourself that no longer needs to outrun the past because you are no longer defined by it. The power of being also lies in its impact on others. When you are trying to prove yourself, people feel the tension. They sense the effort, the insecurity beneath the surface. But when you are simply being, people feel the authenticity. They feel the calm, the strength, the clarity. This is why being has a transformative effect not only on you, but on everyone around you. Without saying a word, you become an example, a reminder of what it looks like to live unapologetically whole. The journey from proving to being is not about doing more. It is about letting go of the need to control perceptions, letting go of the endless chase for approval, letting go of the false belief that your worth is conditional. And in that letting go, you discover a profound freedom. The freedom to live as you are without disguise, without defense, without apology. That freedom is where your true power lies, because in being, you stop needing the world to validate you, and instead, you begin to validate yourself from within. The old self is not simply who you were yesterday. It is the collection of identities, beliefs, and emotional patterns you have carried for years. It is the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, and how the world works. It is shaped by your past experiences, the voices of authority figures, the culture you grew up in, and the wounds you never fully addressed. And often, the habit of trying to prove yourself is deeply tied to this old self, because it is this outdated version of you that still feels the need to justify its worth. To break free from the old self is to release the very foundation upon which the need for proving rests. The old self is familiar. It may not be comfortable, but it is predictable. The mind craves predictability because it equates it with survival. If you have always lived with the belief that you need to prove yourself, then even though that belief drains you, the mind clings to it. It becomes part of your identity, the achiever, the overgiver, the performer, the one who never stops working to earn respect. The problem is, if you keep repeating the same identity, you keep creating the same reality. The future cannot unfold in new ways when you are chained to the same old patterns. Breaking free from the old self begins with awareness. You have to recognize the voice of that identity, the moments it shows up, the triggers that awaken it. Maybe it's the subtle anxiety when someone doubts you. Maybe it's the automatic urge to over-explain yourself. Maybe it's the exhaustion that comes from saying yes to things you didn't want to do, just to avoid disappointing others. All of these are signs of the old self at work, and until you see it clearly, you cannot step out of it. But awareness is only the first step. To truly free yourself, you have to make a choice. You have to decide that you are no longer going to live from the memories of who you were, but from the vision of who you want to become. This choice is powerful, but it is also uncomfortable, because the moment you stop living as the old self, your mind and body resist. They crave the familiar emotions: fear, insecurity, unworthiness, because those emotions are chemically addictive. You have rehearsed them for years. To live without them feels foreign, even unsafe. And so the body tries to pull you back into the old identity, back into the cycle of proving, back into the comfort of what is known. This is the point where many people give up. They try to change, but the pull of the old self feels too strong. They assume change isn't possible, but the truth is, this resistance is not a sign that you cannot change. It is a sign that you are in the very process of change. To break free, you must be willing to endure the discomfort of the unknown. You must train yourself to sit with the unfamiliar, to trust that the future self you are creating is more real than the past self you are releasing. Breaking free from the old self also requires you to stop rehearsing the past in your mind. Every time you replay the old stories of failure, rejection, or unworthiness, you reinforce the old identity. You strengthen the neural circuits that keep you tied to who you used to be. But when you interrupt those patterns, when you choose not to replay the story, when you choose to focus instead on the state of being you want to embody, you begin to weaken the grip of the old self. Over time, those circuits fade and new circuits form. This is how you biologically and emotionally recondition yourself into a new identity. The old self thrives on external validation because it was built on the belief that you were never enough as you are. It is like a mask you wear, carefully constructed to gain approval and acceptance. But masks are heavy, and eventually they crack. Breaking free means removing the mask altogether and allowing yourself to exist without performance. It means facing the fear that without the mask, people may not approve of you, and choosing authenticity anyway, because the truth is, the mask never gave you real acceptance. It only gave you conditional approval. True acceptance only comes when you show up as your authentic self. As you release the old self, you also release the need to constantly prove who you are. The proving came from the insecurity of the past identity. The being comes from the wholeness of the new one. The new self does not need to chase approval because it already feels enough. It does not need to justify its existence because it already knows its worth. And the more you live in alignment with this new self, the more the outer world begins to reflect it back to you. People respond differently, opportunities appear, life begins to organize itself around your new state of being. Breaking free is not a single moment. It is a practice. It requires daily awareness, daily choice, daily commitment to living as the future rather than the past. It requires the courage to let go of the familiar story and step into the unknown field of possibility. And in that field, proving becomes irrelevant because you no longer need the world to validate what you already know to be true. Living as your future self is the moment when you stop waiting for external circumstances to prove your worth, and instead begin to embody the identity of the person you are becoming. It is no longer about who you were in the past or even who you are right now. It is about stepping into the version of yourself that already exists in potential and allowing that version to guide your choices, your energy, and your state of being. This is where transformation becomes real, because when you live as your future self, you are no longer reacting to life. You are creating it. Most people live in reverse. They wait for something outside of them to change before they feel they can change inside. They tell themselves, when I get the promotion, then I'll feel successful. When I find the right partner, then I'll feel loved. When people finally recognize me, then I'll feel worthy. But this is the endless trap of proving yourself. It is conditional living, where your sense of self is always dependent on something external. The problem is that the external is unpredictable and fleeting, and so the chase never ends. Living as your future self turns this model upside down. Instead of waiting for the external to give you permission, you begin to generate the internal state first. You ask yourself, how would my future self feel? How would they walk, speak, think, and act? And then you begin to live that way now. You embody the feeling of success before the success arrives. You live in the vibration of love before the relationship appears. You express worthiness before the recognition ever comes. In doing so, you collapse the distance between who you are and who you are becoming, because energetically and emotionally you are already there. This practice requires imagination, but not the kind of imagination that is fantasy or escape. It is a conscious rehearsal of the future in the present moment. When you consistently align your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors with the reality you are creating, your body does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. Biologically, it begins to wire itself to that future. Chemically, it begins to experience the feelings of that future now. And energetically, it begins to broadcast a new signal to the world around you, attracting opportunities, people, and circumstances that resonate with your new state of being. Living as your future self also requires discipline, because the old self will try to pull you back. The old self is familiar and its emotions are addictive. It will whisper doubts. You can't live that way yet. You haven't proven yourself. You don't deserve it. But when you live as your future self, you stop negotiating with those old voices. You choose to embody the new reality even when the external world has not yet caught up. You begin to act not as a reaction to what is, but as a declaration of what will be. This is not about pretending or faking. Pretending comes from a place of lack, from trying to convince yourself of something you do not believe. Living as your future self comes from a place of alignment, from knowing that the potential for your highest self already exists within you. It is not about forcing a new identity, but allowing it to emerge by giving it your attention, your energy, and your commitment. It is about stepping into the reality where you no longer need to prove anything, because the very act of living as your future self is proof enough. Imagine for a moment that the future version of you who feels whole and complete walked into your life today. How would they carry themselves? How would they respond to challenges? How would they treat others? How would they treat themselves? Every choice you make can either reinforce the old self or align with that future self. Each time you choose to embody the energy of your future self, you strengthen that reality. Over time, it stops being a future version. It becomes who you are now. Living as your future self also changes the way you interact with others. Instead of seeking approval, you offer authenticity. Instead of chasing recognition, you radiate confidence. Instead of proving your value, you embody it. People around you begin to notice the shift, not because you told them, but because they can feel it. Your presence speaks louder than your words. You no longer have to explain yourself, because the energy you carry is undeniable. This practice also frees you from the weight of time. Most people are bound by the past, defined by their memories, and controlled by their familiar emotions. When you live as your future self, you are no longer imprisoned by what happened before. You are anchored in the present, aligned with the vision of what you are becoming. Time becomes a tool, not a trap. Instead of dragging your past into your present, you bring your future into your present. And that shift changes everything about how life unfolds for you. Living as your future self is the ultimate release from the need to prove yourself. Because when you are already embodying wholeness, when you already feel enough, there is nothing left to prove. You no longer look outward for confirmation, because the confirmation is already within you. Your state of being becomes the evidence. Your inner world becomes the proof. And the more you live this way, the more the external world naturally begins to mirror it back, not because you chased it, but because you became it. At some point in life, you must decide that you are no longer living for the applause, the recognition, or the approval of the world around you. You must decide to step out of the cycle of proving and into the freedom of being, because proving will always keep you chasing, always keep you striving, always keep you tethered to the expectations of others. But being will root you in authenticity, align you with your highest self, and allow you to live from a place of wholeness that no one can take away. When you reclaim your attention, when you withdraw your energy from external validation and redirect it inward, you discover a power that was always there, untouched, unbroken, unshaken. You realize that your worth was never up for debate, that your identity was never meant to be on trial, and that your value does not need to be proven, only expressed. Breaking free from the old self and living as your future self is not a destination but a continual practice, a conscious choice made in every moment. And as you embody that choice, you discover the quiet strength that comes from no longer needing to convince anyone of who you are. You become unshakable, magnetic, and free, not because the world finally gave you permission, but because you stopped asking for it.